We've got 4 sizzling hot stories for today's episode. Story number 1, new banknotes are in circulation, fresh new faces, same old economy. Story number 2, politician claims that men getting their act together will make women want to have babies. Story number 3, Japan adds most severe category to heat stroke warnings amid deadly temperatures. And story number 4, foreign resident harassed by Japanese neighbor calls the police. At the end of the video, I'll also give you my recommendation for YouTube video of the week and podcast of the week. Sound good? This Week in Japan, coming right up. Hey everyone, it's Mizhelle. You're watching the Tokyo Past 3 channel. Welcome to an episode of This Week in Japan, where I catch you up with what's buzzing in the land of the rising sun. If this is your first time watching this channel, this is a fairly new series which started in a live stream and I've adapted to a long form video format. Timestamps are in the description box if you came here for a specific story. This episode is being filmed in July and it is absolutely excruciatingly hot in Tokyo. Going outside is very uncomfortable, and I know because I had to film an episode featuring unusual places, which I'm very excited to share in the near future. One of the places I feature in this video is around a 10-minute walk from the station, and on my script, I had this idea of introducing the place in front of the destination, but by the time I arrived there, I was already sweating buckets. I was unfilmable. So I scrapped all that and I'm just gonna put in narration for that part because you can't really do anything with that kind of weather. That said, the punishing heat is one of the stories that we'll get into today. So let's dive right into story number 1, which is new banknotes are in circulation. If you're coming to Japan, you might want to know this because our money has just gotten a facelift and these are the new faces. On the 10,000 yen note, we have Shibusawa Eiichi, also known as the father of Japanese economy. During his lifetime, he was involved in the launch of around 500 businesses. That's a lot. On the 5,000 yen note, we have Tsuda Umeko, founder of Tsuda University and among the very first Japanese women to study abroad. And finally, on the 1,000 yen note, we have Kitasato Shibasaburo, that's a handful to say, a bacteriologist credited for obtaining the first pure culture of tetanus. Now, these banknotes are changing for the first time in 20 years, and you might be wondering why? Well, there's 2 reasons. One is for security. These new notes now have 3D holograms that make them difficult to counterfeit. Also, one of the new features is that they have tactile marks to help the visually impaired recognize different denominations. That's really one of the things that I really like about Japan. I feel like Japan is more sensitive to the needs of differently abled people. You know those ridges that you see in train platforms and on the roads, the bumpy ones that have yellow lines? They're there to help blind people navigate their way without relying on other people. Buses and trains are also equipped to handle wheelchairs, and you know that they have a manual for assisting these people because it's a very common thing to see in Japan. Now, the other reason why the Bank of Japan is releasing new money is because these new faces are supposed to represent the current values of modern Japan, or at least that's what the press release says. So, how was the public reaction in Japan? Some people were enthusiastic. As in the cases in Japan, a lot of people love to line up, and some even lined up for up to 6 hours just to get their hands on these new banknotes. There was even a report of a man who traveled all the way from Hokkaido to the BOJ just to exchange his old banknotes to new ones. I think part of this is also symbolic. The state of the economy these days has been depressing, and having new banknotes is kind of like having omamori or a lucky charm that might just draw in good luck for your finances. As for me, I haven't had any of these bills. I tried to withdraw money the other day just to see if I'm gonna get any of these new bills, but I didn't. I rarely use paper money these days because I feel like every time I put them in my wallet, there's also the risk of losing them. Obviously, digital has its own risks as well, but I feel a lot safer with digital than paper money. However, not everyone has been enthusiastic about the change. Prior to the new money rolling out, there's already been talks about existing vending machines not being able to handle the new money. That goes for the vending machines that you see on the streets and the ramen shops and cafeterias that usually make use of these vending machines. According to Nikkei Compass, there's around 4.1 billion vending machines that have now become obsolete because of this new money. Some municipalities apparently offer subsidies for these shops that will be affected, but most of the cost has to be shouldered by the shop owner. And I don't know, if you're a big corporation, maybe you can handle it better, but if you're a small business already dealing with the rising prices of basic commodities, yikes. But that's it for our first story. If you live in Japan or if you're currently traveling the country, let me know in the comments if you've seen this new money, because I certainly haven't. My friends haven't. All right, moving on to story number 2. Politician claims that men getting their act together will make women want to have babies. What do you think about that statement? This story took place in July 7th in Gunma during an LGBT convention, and seasoned politician and former House of Representatives Sasagawa Takashi, during a speech, suggested that if men, or if Japanese men in particular, just got their act together, women would feel more inclined to have babies. There's a recording of it, which I'll link down below, but that's pretty much the gist of it. The Japanese word he used for getting your act together was shikkari suru, which means like snap out of it, get your act together. I have to hand it to him for novelty, because Japanese politicians usually blame women for the declining birth rate. Like former Prime Minister Aso has been quoted blaming women for the declining birth rate, which internationally he got really a lot of criticism for. And that's not limited to male politicians, because just earlier this year, Foreign Minister Kamikawa Yoko raised the question of how can we call ourselves women if we do not give birth? Good God, the internalized misogyny on that one. By the way, while researching on this, I found an article that collects the most bizarre gender-related comments of Japanese politicians. It's in Japanese, but you can run Google Translate on it. It is wildly hilarious, but also horrifying at the same time, because these are the politicians running the country. Now, back to the comment that guys getting it together is the solution to the declining birth rate in Japan. I find that this is just as out of touch as the comments women blaming for it. When I did the first This Week in Japan live stream, I did touch up on the subject. Based on a survey, financial concerns is the primary reason why people are not getting married and by extension rearing children. And personally, I feel that. I have many reasons for why I'd rather not have kids, but one of them is economic. To give birth to a child when you're not even sure that you might be able to provide the basic needs, that's tantamount to abuse, in my opinion, as someone who has experienced extreme poverty. You can argue that money can't buy happiness, but the lack of it certainly drives people to do horrible things, and sometimes children get the brunt of it. The other thing that I brought up in the live stream is that the institutions at play make it unattractive to choose motherhood, because once you become a mother in Japan, that's mostly the identity that you have to wear. Anything else is eventually used to criticize you. If you want to know more about that, I'll link that down below. And there's also this blog post that I wrote a few years ago about Horikita Maki, the actress, retiring to give way to wifehood and motherhood. I'll also link that down below. Up next, we have story number 3. Japan adds the category most severe to heat stroke warnings amid deadly temperatures. So every year when summer comes, we usually get the PSAs for heat strokes, but this year we seem to be facing a record high. Just last week alone, the number of people rushed to hospitals for heat strokes quadrupled compared to the previous week. And that's around 9,000 people who needed emergency care. In fact, it's gotten so intense that we apparently needed a new category to the heat stroke severity scale, and they're calling it most severe. The symptoms include having a body temperature of over 40 degrees Celsius and not being able to speak properly. That is incredibly scary. Just to give you an idea in numbers of how hot it's been, the other day, Shizuoka Prefecture recorded 40 degrees Celsius, and the government has pretty much issued heat stroke alert warnings for 26 prefectures. So yeah, it's getting hotter than usual, and I think we're all feeling the effects of global warming. And I made sure to include this story on today's episode because I've experienced heat exhaustion twice. It is really no joke. The first time I experienced it, I didn't even know it was heat stroke. You know how I love unusual destinations, right? I was trying to film Anamori Inari Shrine, which is infamous for supposedly being cursed because a lot of people tried to move the Tori gate, and the people who tried to move it in the past always met some kind of misfortune. I don't know, it was interesting. I wanted to film it. Now, since the location is near Haneda Airport, there are no tall buildings or tall trees that can give me shade, and the walk from the station to the shrine is around 10 minutes. Now, 10 minutes is a breeze in any other weather, but in the Japanese summer, it is torture. And when I got to the shrine, I didn't really feel the effects right away. Of course, I prayed and paid my respects first. That's my usual SOP when I'm going to a shrine. But as I was taking pictures,
I started feeling my vision clouding and my hearing fading.
And based on experience, I had a lot of fainting spells when I was a kid. I knew that I was gonna faint, so I just sat down and tried to drink water. And I don't really know how long I was sitting, but it felt like such a really long time before I recovered. And after that, I just felt like I'm gonna cancel the shoot because this is not worth it. Maybe the shrine doesn't really like people. So I started going home. But on the train home, I started feeling a different kind of discomfort. This time, food was trying to exit my body both ways. So I actually had to get off the train, go to the toilet and relieve myself, and then sit on a bench until the feeling went away. And at that time, I didn't really think it was heat exhaustion. Again, I thought the shrine maybe really didn't like me, even though I prayed and paid respects, and me feeling bad maybe was a warning from the shrine. Now, I did realize that it was indeed heat exhaustion when I experienced similar symptoms a year later on a different shoot. Now, this shoot was for TV, for NHK specifically, and I was running late, so I ran to get on the bus. It was early morning, so it was still not that hot, but it was warm, and then I got on the bus, which was air conditioned, so I think the difference in temperatures contributed to me not feeling well later. And then I didn't feel any symptoms then. It was only after I got on the train, which was blasting really cold air, that I felt really sick. It was a weekday morning, so there was no place to sit, and I was standing there, and again I could feel my vision and hearing fading, and I thought, oh no, I'm gonna faint. But I couldn't get off the train because I was gonna be late for the shoot, so I just tried to power through it. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. The next thing I know, I was already on the floor. I full on fainted and didn't even realize it. By the time I came to, people were already propping me up, and it took me a while to realize where I was because I was disoriented when I lost consciousness. Somebody gave me their seat, which I was very thankful for, and a lot of people were giving me tissues, which I thought was to wipe the sweat away, but then I realized later that I actually had thrown up because I had vomit on my clothes. Thankfully, it was on my puff sleeve, which kind of hid the vomit. I only realized later when I was like trying to fix my clothes. Again, I was on my way to a shoot and I didn't have any spare clothes with me, so thankfully the throw up was not really that obvious. By the time I got to the shoot, I was already feeling better, so thankfully I powered through that day with nothing else happening. So again, take this as your warning. Be careful. Heat stroke is a definite risk in Japan, no matter your age or fitness level. Story number 4 comes from Reddit, so let me read it to you. This was posted on r/Japan Life by extension _till_5116, titled Neighbor Harassing Me. So I live in Tokyo and have since March of 2023. I moved to my now apartment in July 2023. I have had zero problems and love where I'm living. That's up until my next door neighbors moved in 2 months ago. The first time this happened, I was extremely apologetic and felt guilty that I had been a disturbance and too loud. My neighbors, 2 female and 1 male, all Japanese, came to my door banging and screaming as loud as possible, telling me to shut up and be quiet. I had opened the door, and as I did, one woman grabbed the side of the door, pulled it out of my hand, and opened it wide, stepping almost into my apartment. I speak decent Japanese, I apologized, and since then, I have been hypersensitive to any noise I make at night. I think it's crazy the way they tried to open the door. I mean, you can complain as a neighbor, but the moment you try to enter somebody else's apartment, I think it's already breaking and entering. I'm not sure about Japanese laws, but that's not usual behavior. That was until last night, 3 a.m. I was playing the game online with my friends. I keep my headphones half off so I can hear my own voice and make sure I'm basically whispering as I play. I have a door shutting off my bedroom from the rest of the apartment that I also keep shut to try to keep quiet. I know that this time I was not being loud. This woman comes to my door, banging and screaming again. You're probably hurting yourself more by doing this kind of action. She covers my peephole with her hand so I can't see outside of it. I can't see how many people there are or if she has a weapon or anything. I know that may sound unrealistic, but I felt in my gut that there was a reason she didn't want me to see what she was doing. That is creepy. She kept almost like using a taunting tone, telling me to open my door over and over. I told her I'm so sorry, I really thought I was being quiet. She started to rip and pull at my doorknob, and it sounded like she was either using a key or her nails to scratch at my door. It was terrifying. That is crazy behavior 100%. No decent person would try to do that. I called the police afterwards because even if I was too loud, I feel like this reaction is not warranted. Definitely, this is crazy behavior. Police showed up and spoke to me, and they were shockingly very supportive and nice. Good for you. I was scared to even call them because I'm a foreigner and my neighbors are Japanese, so I thought I wouldn't be believed. They tried to knock on my neighbor's door and rang the doorbell a few times, but she ignored them. Okay, this time around, she gets to ignore them and wouldn't come to the door. I have also reported this to the management and the company that helped me get the apartment. I'm very uncomfortable. I'm worried that she could either get me evicted or even harm me. I leave in about a month and go back to America. I feel as if this person is searching for any opportunity to act aggressively to me. I'm scared to even leave my apartment, or out of fear, I'll run into her. I don't know what to do. And in parentheses, OP says, I live in a newer RC apartment. So RC stands for reinforced concrete. These are usually the best kind of walls to have in your apartment because they reduce the noise. You can still hear some of it, but not as much as compared to wooden walls, for example. I used to live in a share house, and the noise level, I could really hear what the other person is doing on the other side, so not recommended. If you're trying to move apartments, please pay attention to the kind of walls. It's usually listed in the details of the listing. And then after that, we get an update, and it says, I am now convinced this woman is out for me. I was laying in bed today. I got up to use the bathroom once. This was about at 12:30 a.m. This time, she did not bang on my door, but she did ring my doorbell 300 times. I assume this is a hyperbole, but okay, we get the picture. I got up, walked to the door, and she asked me to open the door to talk to her while repeatedly ringing my doorbell as she talked. Maybe she's just lonely and wants to talk to someone. This time, she spoke to me very softly. That is so weird. I told her she can call the police as I will not be talking to her, and she continued to stand at my door, ringing the doorbell, so I called the police. The police showed up, and she tried to tell them I was making all kinds of noise, talking, and stomping around, with her boyfriend also outside telling them. I promise on whatever God you believe in, I was lying in bed. I haven't played the game because I thought this would be the best route until I go home. I haven't talked to anyone, and I guess if me walking to pee was an issue, then okay, she got me there. Sounds like they are hypersensitive. She did not try to enter my apartment as the police came to my door, but the officers told her to get back. She also did bang on my wall several times today when I did laundry, when I used my microwave, and again when I was lying in bed. This happened all at different times throughout the afternoon and then in the evening when I went to bed. I cannot exist in this apartment. Oh my God, I feel so sorry for you. The police were very supportive and assured me they told her she cannot attack or hurt me. Really reassuring. I'm sure she will listen. I mean, if she's already crazy. They told me to keep my door locked properly, don't open it for her, and call the police if she comes back. I am exhausted. Am I going to end up shanked from behind one day and this be one of the stories where the police continued to show up and did nothing? Legitimate worry, I think. I've contacted the apartment manager, but they are extremely slow to get back to me, and they did inform me that there was no camera in the hallway. I'm so frustrated, scared, and I truly cannot stand living here anymore. I don't know what to do. First of all, OP, I'm really sorry that this happened to you. You're supposed to feel safe and comfortable in your own home, and when you have unpleasant neighbors, this kind of negates the whole thing. Noise is a common complaint in apartment complexes. That's one of the reasons why I actually moved from my old apartment to this one, because I couldn't stand my neighbors. I mean, I didn't really have to face them or anything, but on both sides I had couples. That said, what kind of neighbors you'll get really depends on luck. You having crazy neighbors, I find, doesn't really depend on race. I have this Japanese friend who used to complain a lot about the couple next door, and it was hilarious, but at the same time, I felt really sorry for her. At one point, the female half of that couple was also caught on her camera taking off her pants and kind of peeing outside her door. We never really figured out what it was, but maybe that's for the best. But thankfully, they moved afterward. It doesn't really matter how decent or even upscale your neighborhood is, because I had this one friend who lived in a decent apartment complex, but the Japanese guy next door called the police on her, saying that her room stank in an Asian kind of way. And, upon hearing that story, I was like, dude, you're also Asian. Do you not know your geography? But anyway, this friend was really smart, so she played the female card very well and talked softly to the police and let them in, saying, does my room stink? So obviously it didn't. The guy next door was just really crazy. And then I also know this couple who lives in an upscale neighborhood in Tokyo, and they're the only international family in a Japanese neighborhood. And I guess in this case, race does play a role, because they feel like they are being ostracized and even being bullied for being foreign. Overall, this experience I find is universal, whether you're Japanese or you're a foreign resident living in Japan. It just really depends on luck. OP did say that she is about to go back to her home country, and hopefully nothing really bad happens before then. Speaking of neighbors, this is no connection to Japan whatsoever, but I finished reading the novel Good Neighbors by Sarah Langen, I think a week ago, and I found it to be a really engrossing read. It's about a Brooklyn family that moves to an upscale neighborhood, hoping that the environment would be better for their children. And it was okay for a while, but then a sinkhole opens and a girl from the neighborhood falls in, and the family gets blamed for all the misfortune that happens afterward. The book is a really good insight on how mob mentality forms, and I also found it interesting that the author has a degree in environmental toxicology, which makes all the descriptions about how hazardous the sinkhole is and the waste that comes from it really detailed. I also found the characters to be really fleshed out, and I ended up loving the children of the neighborhood because they were the only ones who kind of made sense all throughout the novel as the adults were going out of their minds. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, do check it out. Finally, I want to end this video with my recommendations for the week, and on this episode we have a podcast and a YouTube video. The podcast is Deep Dive from the Japan Times, and it's episode 194. It's about how the summer heat is actually changing the summer music festival industry in Japan. So our biggest music festivals usually happen in summer. We have Rock On, we have Summer Sonic, etc., etc. And it is an interesting listen. The link is down below. And my other recommendation is a YouTube video from Currently Hannah, wherein she compares Asian sunscreen to Australian sunscreen. It's a 35-minute video which flew by very fast for me because I was just interested in everything she had to say. It is a very interesting watch. And that's it for this episode of This Week in Japan. Thank you very much for watching, and don't forget to let me know which story you found most interesting in the comment section below. This has been Mizhelle for Tokyo Past 3. I'll see you again next week for another roundup. Bye!